Shadows crept across the marble floors of a high-end financial firm in downtown Chicago, where Alexandra Chen's heels clicked softly against the polished surface. To her colleagues at Marshall & Reed Investment Partners, she was nothing more than a brilliant financial analyst with a talent for numbers and a quiet demeanor. They had no idea that those same hands that typed market reports had once disarmed bombs in Damascus, or that the mind that calculated profit margins had memorized every escape route from the building the moment she started working there. Now, as she sat in her corner office reviewing client portfolios, Alex was about to discover that her carefully constructed cover was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. Sometimes the past doesn't just catch up to you, it kicks down your door and drags you back into the shadows. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly before Alexandra Chen as she stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of her 47th floor office. The early morning sun painted the glass buildings in shades of gold and amber, their surfaces reflecting light like mirrors across the urban landscape. Her office at Marshall & Reed was immaculate, every file perfectly aligned, each pen precisely placed on her mahogany desk. This obsession with order wasn't just about aesthetics. It was ingrained from years of training where the smallest detail could mean the difference between life and death. Alex adjusted her cream-colored blazer, a far cry from the tactical gear she once wore. At 32, she had mastered the art of blending in, of becoming invisible in plain sight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a professional bun, her makeup subtle but flawless. Everything about her appearance was designed to be forgotten the moment someone looked away. Ms. Chen, Sarah, her assistant, appeared at the door. "Mr. Marshall would like to see you about the Peterson account." Alex nodded, gathering her tablet and the relevant files. "Thank you, Sarah. How's your mother? Doing after her surgery?" The question was calculated, part of her carefully constructed persona. Keeping track of personal details about colleagues helped maintain her cover as the caring co-worker. Sarah's face lit up at the inquiry, exactly as expected. "Much better. Thank you for asking. The doctors say she'll be home by next week." As Alex walked through the office, she noticed everything while appearing to notice nothing. Johnson from accounting was wearing a new watch, probably finally got that promotion. Lisa from HR had been crying. The tissue box on her desk was new. Two unfamiliar maintenance men were working on the elevator panels. Their uniforms were pressed too perfectly, their boots too polished. She filed that detail away for later investigation. Robert Marshall's office occupied the corner of the building, its glass walls offering a panoramic view of the city. He was a man in his 60s, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that came from decades of building an empire. As Alex entered, he was speaking rapidly on his phone in Mandarin. Her expression remained neutral, despite understanding every word about the merger he was discussing. "Alexandra, please, sit," he said after ending the call. "The Peterson account is causing some concerns. Their portfolio performance is raising red flags with our compliance team." Alex opened her tablet, pulling up the relevant data. "I noticed some unusual patterns in their international transfers, all legal but structured in a way that suggests they're preparing for something significant." Marshall leaned back in his chair, studying her. "That's exactly what worries me. With the current political climate, we can't afford any hint of impropriety. I want you to do a deep dive into their accounts. If you find anything suspicious, we need to know before the regulators." "Do?" "Of course, Mr. Marshall. I'll have a preliminary report by tomorrow morning." As she left his office, Alex's mind was already racing. The Peterson account had caught her attention weeks ago. The patterns were similar to ones she'd seen during Her operative days, often used by organizations to move money ahead of major operations. But that was a different life, one she'd walked away from 3 years ago when she'd accepted the agency's offer of a new identity and a chance at a normal life. Back in her office, Alex began pulling up financial records, her fingers flying across the keyboard. To anyone passing by, she looked like any dedicated analyst working late. They couldn't see that beneath her desk, her free hand was sending encrypted messages through a modified smartphone to her former handler, Michael Torres. The sun was setting when Sarah knocked on her door again. "Miss Chen, there's someone here to see you. Says she's an old friend from university. Claire Williams?" Alex's hand froze over the keyboard. She had never known anyone named Claire Williams, and she hadn't attended any university under her current identity. More importantly, Sarah always went home at 5:30 to relieve her father, who watched her kids. It was now 6:45. "Send her in, Sarah, and you should head home. You've stayed late enough." Sarah smiled, but something was off about it. The maintenance men from earlier flashed through Alex's mind. She casually opened her bottom drawer, fingers brushing against the false bottom where her Glock 19 was hidden. 3 years of peace had not made her careless. The woman who walked in was striking, tall, with platinum blonde hair and ice blue eyes. She wore an expensive suit that didn't quite hide the athletic build beneath. "Alexandra Chen," she said, closing the door behind her, or should I say Agent Morgan. It's been a while. Alex kept her expression neutral, even as her mind raced through possible scenarios and escape routes. "I think you have me confused with someone else. I don't know any Agent Morgan." The woman, Claire, smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. 3 years ago, Damascus. You were running point on Operation Blackstone when everything went sideways. Ring any bells?" "I'm a financial analyst," Alex replied calmly, her hand inching closer to the drawer. "I've never been to Damascus. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have work to finish." Claire's smile widened. "Always the professional. That's what made you the best. But things are happening, Morgan. Things that require your particular skill set. The agency sent me to bring you in." "The agency has no authority here. I fulfilled my contract. They promised me a new life, and I earned it. Promises change when the stakes get high enough. You know that better than anyone." Claire took a step forward. "We can do this the easy way, or—" The sound of breaking glass down the hall interrupted her. Alex's trained ears recognized the pattern. Systematic breach, multiple entry points. This wasn't a simple extraction. "That's not the agency, is it?" Alex said, rising slowly from her chair. Claire's expression confirmed her suspicion. "No, it's not. We need to move. Now." The sound of gunfire erupted from the hallway, and Alex's peaceful facade of normal life shattered like a mirror hitting concrete. Sometimes, she realized, the past doesn't just catch up to you, it brings an army. The next moments unfolded with practiced precision. Alex's body moved on autopilot, muscle memory from years of training taking over. She kicked off her heels. The Louboutins were lovely but useless in combat, revealing the thin, tactical socks underneath. A quick press under her desk triggered a silent alarm to Torres, while her hand found the Glock. "How many?" she asked Claire, her voice dropping. An octave to its natural register, abandoning the softer tone she'd cultivated for her analyst persona. "At least 12, heavily armed. Professional hit squad by the looks of it. They're after the Peterson files." Claire had drawn her own weapon, a compact Sig Sauer. "And you, apparently." Alex processed this information while moving to the wall, beside her door. "The Peterson account isn't just about money laundering, is it?" "Now you're asking the right questions." Claire positioned herself on the other side. "But we need to survive the next 5 minutes for those answers to matter." The gunfire was getting closer. Alex could hear the methodical way the team was clearing. Offices, professional, thorough. These weren't common criminals. Through the glass walls, she caught glimpses of tactical gear, military-grade weapons. Their movements suggested former special forces training. "The emergency stairwell is compromised," Alex said, her mind mapping the building's layout. "They'll have teams covering all standard exit routes." "The agency has an extraction point on the roof," Claire offered. "Of course they do." Alex's tone was dry. "And I'm supposed to just trust that this isn't an elaborate trap?" "You don't have much choice." A flash of movement in the hallway caught Alex's attention. She pushed Claire back just as bullets shattered the glass wall of her office. They both dropped low, taking cover behind her heavy desk. Alex flipped it on its side in one smooth motion, files and her carefully arranged desk items scattering across the floor. "You're 3 o'clock!" Claire shouted. Alex pivoted, firing twice. The first attacker went down hard. His partner pulled back around the corner, laying down suppressing fire. The sound of shattering glass and screams from other parts of the office told her the attack was widespread. Civilians were at risk. "We need to draw them away from the main office," Alex said, checking her ammunition. "There are still people working late on this floor. Since when does Agent Morgan care about civilian casualties?" Alex shot her a cold look. "I'm not that person anymore." The next few minutes might prove otherwise. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. More attackers were converging on their position. Alex's mind raced through options, drawing on her knowledge of the building's architecture. "The maintenance shaft," she said suddenly, "behind the east wall filing room. It's not on the main blueprints." "How do you know about it? You think I took this job without knowing every inch of this building?" Alex almost smiled. "Old habits." De garde. A grenade rolled into the office. Without hesitation, Alex grabbed it and hurled it back through the shattered wall. The explosion rocked the floor, buying them seconds. She used that time to reach under her desk again, retrieving a small pack hidden in another false compartment. "What's that?" Claire asked as they moved low toward the door. "Insurance." Alex pulled out what looked like a normal phone. "Building's security system is about to have a very bad day." She tapped several commands into the device. Throughout the floor, sprinklers activated, emergency lights began strobing, and fire alarms blared. The chaos would help cover their movement and evacuate any remaining civilians. They made it to the filing room, dodging bullets and trading fire with their pursuers. Alex's shots were precise, economical. She hadn't lost her touch. 3 more attackers went down, but others quickly took their place. "They're well-funded," Claire observed, reloading. "These aren't ordinary mercenaries." "When are they ever?" Alex reached behind a shelf, pressing a hidden panel. A narrow door clicked open, revealing a dark maintenance shaft. "Ladies first." Claire hesitated. "Age before beauty." "Trust issues?" Alex's laugh was humorless. "Smart girl." The sound of boots on broken glass warned them they were almost out of time. Alex made a quick decision, grabbing a small canister from her pack. "Close your eyes." She threw the flashbang around the corner, then shoved Claire into the shaft as the device detonated. They climbed quickly, the sounds of chaos echoing below them. Alex's mind was already moving ahead, planning their next move. The peaceful life she'd built was burning behind her, but a familiar electricity was coursing through her veins. She was supposed to be done with this life, but as bullets ricocheted off the walls around them and adrenaline sharpened her senses to a razor's edge, Alexandra Chen, Agent Morgan, realized that maybe you never really leave this life. Sometimes it finds you, drags you back, and reminds you that normal was always just a beautiful dream. And deep down, in a place she didn't like to acknowledge, part of her had missed this. The maintenance shaft was narrow and dark, lit only by emergency strips that cast everything in a sickly green glow. Water from the sprinkler system dripped down the metal walls, making the climbing bars slick. Alex moved with practiced efficiency, her body remembering rhythms she'd tried to forget. "They're in the shaft." The shout echoed from below, followed by the distinctive sound of bullets hitting metal. "They're persistent," Claire commented, climbing just above Alex. "That's one word for it." Alex reached into her pack, pulling out another device. "Hope you're not afraid of the dark." She pressed a button and dropped it. Seconds later, the emergency lights below them went dark, followed by cursing and confused shouts. The electromagnetic pulse would buy them precious minutes. The old Alex. "Morgan I knew would have dropped something more lethal," Claire observed. The old Alex Morgan didn't have to worry about collateral damage to a building full of innocent people. Alex continued climbing, her mind racing through contingencies. "Speaking of which, how did they get past building security?" "You tell me. You're the one who's been playing house here for 3 years. The shaft began to angle horizontally, leading toward the building's core. Alex's arms burned from the climb, but she pushed through it. "The Peterson account," she said between controlled breaths. "It's connected to Chimera, isn't it?" Claire's slight hesitation was answer enough. Chimera, the ghost organization that had haunted Alex's final mission in Damascus. The mission that had ended with 3 dead agents and her decision to walk away from everything. "You know I can't discuss that." "Cut the bureaucratic bullshit, Claire. Those men back there were strike team operators. I recognize their tactics. Someone's privatized them, and they're not here for a corporate raid." They reached a junction where the shaft split in 3 directions. Alex paused, listening intently. The sounds of pursuit had grown fainter, but she knew better than to assume they'd lost them. "Left," Claire said. "The agency's extraction point is actually to the right," Alex cut her off, her voice hardening. "Want to tell me why you're trying? To lead me the wrong way?" The silence that followed was heavy with tension. Alex turned slowly, keeping her movements controlled despite the confined space. Claire's expression was unreadable in the dim light. "You're as good as they said," Claire finally spoke, her tone changing subtly. "The agency wasn't sure you'd maintained your edge after 3 years of playing stockbroker." "They're not the only ones testing me today, are they?" Alex's grip tightened on her weapon. "Who do you really work for?" The sound of metal groaning interrupted them. The shaft shuddered, and Alex's trained ears picked up the faint beeping of explosive charges. "Down!" She grabbed Claire's arm, pulling them both back toward the junction as explosions ripped through the shaft ahead. The blast wave hit them like a hammer, hot air and debris washing over them as they pressed against the metal walls. When the dust settled, Alex's ears were ringing, but her mind remained sharp. She could see figures in tactical gear rappelling down through the new breach above them. The shaft was compromised. "Time to move," she said, kicking open a ventilation grate beside them. "We're taking the scenic route." They crawled through the ventilation system, the space even tighter than the maintenance shaft. Alex led them through turns and intersections, following a mental map she'd memorized years ago when she'd first taken the job at Marshall and Reed. "You really did cause this entire building," Claire said, a note of admiration in her voice. "First rule of deep cover, always know your exit routes." Alex paused at another junction, checking her phone's modified display. "The funny thing is, you should have known that, which means you're not really an agency, are you? What gave me away? Little things, your suit's Burberry, this season's line. Agency handlers don't make that kind of money. You knew about Damascus, but you called it Operation Blackstone. That was its CIA designation. The agency called it Prophet's Hand. They reached another grate. Through it, Alex could see they were above the building's main security center. Now empty, except for 2 armed men in tactical gear. Their weapons and stance confirmed her suspicions about their military background. "So," Alex continued, her voice barely a whisper, "either you're CIA, which seems unlikely given current interagency protocols, or you're working for someone else. Someone who has access to classified intelligence and enough resources to hire ex-strike team operators." She turned to face Claire, whose composed expression had gained a harder edge. "Someone like Chimera." Claire's smile was cold. I knew there was a reason they wanted you alive. The grate between them and the security center burst inward as Alex kicked it open, dropping down on one of the armed men before he could react. She moved with lethal efficiency, disarming him and using his body as a shield as his partner opened fire. Above, Claire was already moving, but Alex was ready. The next 30 seconds were a blur of violence and precision. When it ended, both operators were down, and Claire was nursing a dislocated shoulder, her weapon kicked across the room. "The agency didn't send you to bring me in," Alex said, checking the fallen men's weapons and equipment. "Chimera wanted to flush me out. The Peterson account, the attack, it's all theater." "Not all of it." Claire grimaced, trying to move her injured arm. "Chimera needs the package you stole in Damascus, the one that wasn't in your agency debrief." Alex's expression didn't change, but her mind raced. The memory stick she'd found, the one she'd kept secret as insurance. She'd hoped 3 years would be enough time for its importance to fade. That's not happening. She ejected the magazine from one of the fallen operator's weapons, checking the ammunition. Military grade, untraceable. "But you already knew that." Voices in the hallway outside announced more company was coming. Alex grabbed a keycard from one of the unconscious men and moved to the door. "They'll keep coming," Claire called after her. "Chimera doesn't stop. You know that better than anyone." Alex paused at the door, her face illuminated by the emergency lights. For a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped, revealing the steel beneath. "Neither do I." She left Claire in the security center, already planning her next move. Her cover was blown, but she still had advantages. She knew this building, knew Chicago, and most importantly, she knew how organizations like Chimera thought. They wanted to play games? Fine. It was time to remind them why Agent Morgan's file was marked extremely dangerous. The peaceful life of Alexandra Chen might be over, but as she moved through the shadows of her burning world, Alex realized that maybe peace had always been the real lie. Alex moved swiftly through the darkened corridors, her stocking feet silent against the marble floors. The building's emergency systems were still blaring, creating a chaotic symphony of alarms and sprinklers. She processed multiple data points as she moved: the positions of security cameras, the placement of emergency exits, the sound patterns of the attackers moving through other floors. Her phone vibrated, a message from Torres finally coming through. "Extraction Team 10, Mins out, North Side. Chimera presence confirmed." She allowed herself a grim smile. At least her old handler was still reliable. The North Side meant the Riverside emergency exit, not ideal with snipers likely in position, but better than the alternatives. The sound of boots on marble made her pause. 3 sets, moving with military precision. She pressed herself into a doorway, controlling her breathing. The operators moved past her position, their tactical gear dripping from the sprinklers. "Targets moving toward the east stairwell," one said into his radio. "Teams 3 and 4, cut her off at 28. Alex smiled. Her false trail was working. She'd triggered the east stairwell sensors remotely, sending them exactly where she wanted them. The real question was why Chimera was willing to commit so many resources to this operation. The Damascus package was valuable, but this level of response suggested something more urgent. She checked her watch. 8 minutes until extraction, time to move. Using the operator's radio chatter as cover, she made her way to the building's west side. The Peterson files were still in her office, encrypted on a hidden drive. She couldn't leave them behind, not now that she knew Chimera's involvement went deeper than money laundering. A sudden explosion rocked the building, the shockwave shattering windows and sending debris raining down. This wasn't part of the pattern. Alex's mind raced through possibilities as she steadied herself against a wall. The attack had been too precise, too contained until now. This felt like shit, she muttered. It's a diversion. She changed direction, heading for the secure server room on the 46th floor. The Peterson files in her office were decoys. The real data would be on the mainframe. If she was right, Chimera's operators were just the visible threat, meant to keep her occupied while someone else went after the true objective. The server room's security panel had been professionally bypassed, the door slightly ajar. Alex approached, silently listening. The soft whir of servers was punctuated by the rapid clicking of keys. Someone was downloading data. She peered through the gap. A single figure sat at the main terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. Their movements were efficient, practiced, not military like the operators above. This was someone who spoke the language of encryption and data architecture. The download's at 60%. The figure spoke suddenly, not turning around. "You might as well come in, Agent Morgan. We both know you're there." Alex pushed the door open, keeping her weapon trained on the figure. A woman in her early 40s turned to face her, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. Even in the dim emergency lighting, Alex recognized her. "Dr. Elizabeth Ward," Alex said, her voice cold. "I thought you died in Damascus." Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. Elizabeth's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Though you certainly tried your best. The agency confirmed the body. The agency confirms a lot of things. That's what makes them so useful." Elizabeth turned back to the terminal. 70%. Alex's finger tightened on the trigger. "Step away from the console." "Or what? You'll shoot me? Create another confirmed death?" Elizabeth laughed softly. "We both know you won't risk damaging that server. Not with what's in the Peterson files. What's Chimera planning? You had 3 years to decrypt that memory stick, Alex. Did you ever manage it? Or were you too busy playing pretend with your new life?" Elizabeth's fingers continued typing. 80%. The Damascus project was shut down. Projects like that don't shut down, Alex. They evolve. They adapt, just like you should have. Elizabeth finally turned away from the console. "Tell me, did you really think you could escape? Become Alexandra Chen, the brilliant financial analyst, live a normal life? It was working pretty well until tonight, was it? Or were you just hiding from who you really are?" Elizabeth stood, smoothing her charcoal grey suit. "The agency didn't give you a new identity because you earned it. They did it because they couldn't control you anymore. Chimera, on the other hand," she smiled, "we embrace what you are." The terminal beeped. "Download complete. Step away from the console," Alex repeated, her voice harder. 90 seconds until extraction," Elizabeth said calmly. "Your handler's team will be on the north side. Unfortunately, they'll find that route. Rather explosive. Chimera's better at planning ahead than the agency ever was." Alex's mind raced. Torres's team was heading into a trap. She had seconds to decide. Stop Elizabeth and secure the data, or warn the extraction team. "Still trying to save everyone," Elizabeth sighed. "That was always your weakness." She moved with surprising speed, throwing something at Alex's feet. A flash of light erupted, temporarily blinding her. By the time Alex's vision cleared, Elizabeth was gone, the sound of her heels clicking rapidly down the hallway. Alex ran to the terminal, fingers flying across the keyboard. The screen showed the downloaded files, Project Perseus, Operation Blackstone, the Peterson accounts, everything Chimera needed. Her phone vibrated again. Torres. "In position, north side clear." Alex made her decision. She pulled a small device from her pack, attaching it to the server. If she couldn't stop the data transfer, she could at least corrupt it. The device would release a virus into the system, scrambling everything Elizabeth had downloaded. She had 45 seconds to reach the extraction point. As she ran through the darkness toward the north side of the building, Alex's mind was already processing what she'd learned. Elizabeth was alive. Chimera hadn't just survived Damascus, they'd grown stronger. And now they had whatever was in the Peterson files. The peaceful life of Alexandra Chen was well and truly over. But as she ran toward uncertainty, she felt a familiar fire in her veins. She had spent 3 years pretending to be someone else, hiding from her true nature. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. Maybe it was time to remind everyone why Agent Morgan had been Chimera's most feared operative before she turned against them. The night wasn't over, and neither was she. Alex burst through the emergency exit onto the rooftop, rain pelting her face as Chicago's night sky loomed above. The extraction team's helicopter was descending, its blades cutting through the thick air, creating a maelstrom of water and wind. Torres stood by the edge, his dark tactical gear glistening wet, gesturing urgently for her to hurry. But something felt wrong. The pattern of the raindrops hitting the rooftop wasn't uniform. There were gaps, places where something was blocking the rain's natural fall. Alex's trained eyes scanned the darkness, and her heartbeat quickened. "Torres, get down!" she screamed over the helicopter's roar. "They're already here!" The night erupted into chaos. Hidden figures in advanced camouflage suits emerged from their positions, their rain-slick armor making them look like creatures from a nightmare. The extraction team's helicopter suddenly banked hard, its searchlight revealing at least 8 Chimera operators converging on their position. Torres dove behind a ventilation unit as gunfire erupted. "Morgan, alternative route, go!" Alex was already moving, her mind calculating trajectories and escape paths. Elizabeth's words echoed in her head. This wasn't just an ambush. It was a carefully orchestrated trap. The helicopter wasn't here for extraction. It was here to limit her escape options. "Torres, the chopper's not ours," she shouted, sliding behind an air conditioning unit as bullets sparked off metal around her. "Check the tail number." She heard Torres curse in Spanish, followed by more gunfire. He'd figured it out too. The Shuga helicopter was Chimera's, designed to look like agency transport. They'd played right into the trap. 47th floor access point, Torres called out between bursts of gunfire. "Ladies' room ventilation shaft. Remember Prague?" Alex smiled grimly. Prague had been one of their closest calls. An extraction gone wrong that had ended with them swimming through sewage tunnels. "Try to keep it cleaner this time." She broke cover, firing precisely at the closest operators. 2 went down, but the others were pressing forward with military precision. These weren't typical mercenaries. Their movements were too coordinated, too professional. They'd trained for this specific scenario. Rolling behind a satellite dish, Alex pulled out her phone. The building's security systems were still compromised. From her earlier hack, she quickly accessed the environmental controls, overriding the safety protocols. Steam began billowing from every rooftop vent, creating an instant smokescreen. "Little trick I learned from you," she heard Elizabeth's voice carry through the chaos. "Always control the environment." Alex's blood ran cold. Elizabeth wasn't just coordinating this operation. She was here, personally overseeing it. This wasn't about the Peterson files anymore. This was about something bigger. "You taught me a lot of things, Elizabeth," Alex called back, using the steam as cover to move toward the access door. "Like how to spot a betrayal before it happens." She heard Elizabeth's laugh, closer now. "Is that what you think happened in Damascus? Betrayal? Oh, Alex, you never did see the bigger picture. I saw enough." Alex reached the access door, only to find it magnetically sealed. Elizabeth had learned from their last encounter. "I saw what Project Perseus really was, what you were willing to do to innocent people." "Innocent?" Elizabeth's voice dripped with disdain. "There are no innocents in this game, Alex. Only assets and obstacles. The sooner you remember that, the better." Torres had made it to her position, his back pressed against the wall beside her. Blood trickled from a graze on his forehead, but his eyes were alert. He held up 3 fingers, then pointed to his left, 3 operators trying to flank them. Alex nodded, reaching into her pack. She pulled out her last flashbang and a small electromagnetic pulse device, a prototype she'd borrowed from the agency before leaving. Torres grinned, recognizing the tech. "Still stealing agency toys, I see," he whispered. "Old habits." She handed him the flashbang. Like Prague. Like Prague. They moved in perfect synchronization, muscle memory from years of partnership taking over. Torres threw the flashbang high, drawing the operator's attention. As they turned to track it, Alex rolled forward, activating the EMP. The device sent out a targeted pulse, frying the operator's tactical gear and night vision equipment. The flashbang detonated, and Alex was already moving. She took down 2 operators before they could recover, their expensive gear now working against them. Torres handled the 3rd with practiced efficiency. "The access door is sealed," Alex said, rejoining him. "Elizabeth's learned a few tricks. Good thing I learned some new ones too." Torres pulled out a small device, attaching it to the door's control panel. "Agency's R&D department has been busy." "You mean the device you definitely didn't steal from them?" Torres winked. "I prefer tactical reallocation." The device beeped, and the magnetic seal released. They slipped inside, just as more operators emerged from the steam cloud. The access stairs were dark, lit only by emergency strips that cast everything in a red glow. "Elizabeth has the Peterson files," Alex said, as they descended rapidly. "But there's more to this. She mentioned Project Perseus again." Torres's expression darkened. That project was supposed to be dead. Apparently not. Alex checked her ammunition, 3 magazines left. "The question is, why now? Why come after me after 3 years? "Maybe because you're the only one who knows what really happened in Damascus," Torres suggested. "The only one who saw..." A massive explosion above them cut him off, shaking the entire stairwell. Debris rained down as the rooftop access point was breached. "They're getting desperate," Alex observed. "Being a senior handler has its advantages." Torres pointed down. "Sub-basement level 3 has an access tunnel that connects to the underground parking garage of the building next door. We can..." His words were cut short by the sound of multiple doors being breached above them. Heavy boots thundered on metal stairs. "They're flooding the stairwell," Alex said, her mind racing. "Standard Chimera protocol, overwhelmed with numbers. Once the target's contained." "Since when do you know Chimera protocols?" Alex gave him a look. "There's a lot about Damascus I never put in my report." They reached the 47th floor landing. Alex could hear the strike teams getting closer, their movements echoing in the confined space. She made a quick decision. "The ventilation shaft. You mentioned it connects to the building's main air system." Torres nodded. "Runs all the way down to the sub-basements. But it'll be a tight fit. Better than being boxed in here." Alex moved to the door. "Ladies' room, you said?" "Just like Prague, minus the sewage. Let's hope." They entered the 47th floor cautiously. The office space was dark and silent, the earlier chaos having driven out any remaining workers. Water from the sprinkler system pooled on the floor, reflecting the emergency lights like mirrors. Alex led them toward the bathrooms, her senses on high alert. The situation felt wrong. The floor was too quiet, too empty. Elizabeth would have anticipated this route. "Torres," she said softly, "when did you get the call to extract me?" He glanced at her. "What do you mean?" "The timing. When exactly did the agency tell you I needed extraction?" Torres was silent for a moment. "Alex..." She turned to face him, her weapon raised. "You didn't get a call, did you? You were already here, waiting." His expression shifted, becoming something harder, more professional. "You always were too smart for your own good." "How long?" Her voice was steady, but inside something was breaking. "How long have you been working for them?" "Since before Damascus." He didn't reach for his weapon. He didn't need to. "Elizabeth said you'd figure it out eventually," She hoped it wouldn't be this soon. In the distance, Alex could hear the strike teams methodically clearing the floor. She was running out of time, and now she was truly alone. Why? Torres shrugged. Same reason you joined the agency. To be part of something bigger. Chimera's going to change the world, Alex. Project Perseus isn't just about power or control. It's about evolution. It's about playing God, Alex spat. And you've seen what happens to people who try that. No, Torres said softly. I've seen what happens to people who stand in the way. The strike teams were getting closer. Alex could hear them clearing rooms, their movements precise and deadly. She kept her weapon trained on Torres, her mind racing through options. You could join us again, Torres offered. Elizabeth still wants you back. You were always her favorite. I bet she says that to all the agents she betrays. Torres smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Last chance, Alex. The world's changing. You can either be part of it or become extinct. Alex's response was a single shot, not at Torres, but at the fluorescent light above him. The bulb exploded, plunging the corridor into darkness. She was moving before the glass hit the floor, her stocking feet silent on the wet marble. Torres's laughter followed her. You can't run forever, Alex. Sooner or later you'll have to choose a side. She rounded a corner just as the strike teams breached the floor's main entrance. Her options were running out, but Alex Morgan had never been one to follow other people's plans. If Torres and Elizabeth wanted to play games, fine. But they'd forgotten something crucial about her. She didn't just break rules, she rewrote them. Alex moved like a shadow through the darkened office, her mind processing multiple scenarios simultaneously. The memory stick from Damascus felt heavy. In her hidden pocket, the one piece of leverage she still had, whatever was on it, whatever connection it had to Project Perseus, it was important enough for Chimera to burn her cover and mount a full-scale assault. The sound of boots on marble echoed from multiple directions. Strike teams were executing a standard sweep pattern, closing in methodically. She counted at least 3 teams of 4 operators each, plus Torres and whatever other surprises Elizabeth had waiting. Agent Morgan. Elizabeth's voice came over the building's PA system, calm and measured. Let's not drag this out unnecessarily. You're only delaying the inevitable. Alex reached a corner office, quickly assessing the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the Chicago skyline and potential escape routes. She pulled out her phone, accessing the building's maintenance systems one last time. You know what your problem always was, Elizabeth, Alex called out, knowing the PA system would pick up her voice. You talk too much. She triggered a cascade failure in the building's electrical grid. Floors above and below them suddenly went dark as circuit breakers blew. Emergency generators kicked in, but they were designed to power essential systems only, the magnetic locks. On the security doors reset, temporarily disengaging. The strike teams faltered for a moment, adjusting to the change in lighting. That moment was all Alex needed. She sprinted toward the windows, firing 3 precise shots at the reinforced glass. The bullets created a pattern of weakening points. Behind her, she heard Torres barking orders. She's going for the windows. Converge on her position. Alex smiled grimly. Not exactly. She threw her last electromagnetic pulse device at the window, then dove behind a desk. The EMP detonated, its focused pulse interacting with the structural stresses she'd created in the glass. The window exploded outward in a shower of fragments. Cold wind whipped through the office as operators rushed in, their weapons trained on her position. But Alex wasn't trying to escape through the window. She was creating a distraction. While everyone's attention was focused on the obvious escape route, she was already moving through a service panel she'd opened on the floor. The building's blueprints had shown maintenance access points every 20 feet, something Elizabeth should have remembered. Clever, she heard Torres say above her, but not clever enough. A small cylinder dropped through the opening behind. Her. Gas grenade. Alex held her breath, pulling herself through the narrow space as quickly as possible. The access shaft led to a maintenance corridor between floors, cramped but navigable. She could hear movement above as the strike teams realized her route. Her phone vibrated, an incoming message from an encrypted number she hadn't seen in 3 years. Marcus Shaw, Navy Pier. 1 hour. Bring the stick. Shaw, her old agency contact. The one who'd helped her disappear after Damascus. If he was reaching out now, the situation was worse than she'd thought. Gunfire erupted above her as operators began shooting through the floor, trying to hit her in the maintenance space. Alex moved faster, ignoring the burning in her lungs from holding her breath. The gas would be dispersing through the ventilation system, but she couldn't risk exposure. She reached another access panel and kicked it open, emerging into a storage room on the 46th floor. Her muscles protested as she pulled herself up, but years of training kept her moving. The package is heading to 46, she heard Torres's voice over radio chatter. All teams converge. Elizabeth wants her alive. Alex checked her weapons and remaining equipment. 2 magazines, 1 smoke grenade, her phone, and the memory stick. Not great odds against multiple heavily armed teams. But then, she'd never been one to play the odds. She moved to the storage room door, listening. Multiple teams were spreading out across the floor, coordinating their movements with professional precision. They'd expect her to keep moving down, trying to reach the ground floor. Time to disappoint them. Alex pulled out her phone one last time, accessing the building's fire suppression systems. With a few quick commands, she overrode the safety protocols. For the 46th floor. Fun fact about modern office buildings, she said loudly, knowing they could hear her. The fire suppression systems in server rooms use halon gas. Perfectly safe in small doses, but when you combine it with the building's main oxygen supply, she heard Torres curse. Everyone out, now! The suppression system activated with a whoosh, flooding the floor with gas. Combined with the oxygen being pumped through the ventilation system, it created a potent knockout gas. She heard bodies hitting the floor as operators succumbed to the mixture. Alex pulled a compact rebreather from her pack, her last piece of emergency equipment. As she made her way through the unconscious strike teams, she caught sight of Torres, slumped near the elevator, his face peaceful in unconsciousness. Sweet dreams, old friend. She took his weapon and spare magazines. He'd have done the same. The elevator doors opened as she approached, revealing Elizabeth standing calmly inside. She wore a rebreather of her own, her expression amused. I taught you that trick, Elizabeth said, her voice slightly muffled, back when you were still learning. You taught me a lot of things. Alex raised her weapon. Including how to spot a trap, Elizabeth smiled. Good, you haven't lost your edge. She held up a tablet showing security footage of the building's lobby. Multiple tactical teams were deploying, setting up a perimeter. But then, this isn't really about capturing you, is it? Navy Pier, Alex said, understanding Dawn. Shaw's message. You wanted me to know about the meeting. Very good. Elizabeth stepped out of the elevator, her movements elegant despite the tactical gear she wore. Marcus Shaw is a loose end, one you're going to help us tie up. And why would I do that? Because if you don't show up at Navy Pier in exactly 1 hour, a certain financial analyst named Samuel Chen, no relation to your cover identity, I assume, will have an unfortunate accident on his way home from his law office. Alex's blood ran cold. Samuel, the one person who had made her feel human during her 3 years of hiding. They'd met at a coffee shop, a genuine accident that had turned into weekly conversations about books and music. She'd been careful never to let it become more than friendship, but even that had been too much of a connection. Touch him, and nothing will stop me from hunting you down. Elizabeth's smile widened. That's exactly what we're counting on. She pressed a button on her tablet, and the elevator doors began to close. 1 hour, Alex, don't be late. As the doors shut, Alex heard Elizabeth's final words, "And do try to make it interesting, for old time's sake." Standing alone in the gas-filled corridor, Alex Morgan felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years, pure, focused rage. They'd taken her peace, her cover, and now they were threatening the one genuine connection she'd allowed herself. It was time to remind Chimera why she'd been their best operative before she turned against them. 1 hour to reach Navy Pier. 1 hour to save Shaw and protect Samuel. 1 hour to unleash the person she'd been trying so hard to forget. The game was changing, and Alex Morgan was done playing defense. Part 3. Ghosts in the Machine. Chicago's streets glistened with rain as Alex emerged from Marshall and Reed's underground parking garage on a borrowed Ducati motorcycle. The night had transformed the city into a maze of neon reflections and dark shadows, perfect cover for someone who knew how to move unseen. 47 minutes until the Navy Pier meeting. Her mind raced as she wove through traffic, muscle memory taking over as she navigated the wet streets. Shaw's message wasn't just a coincidence. Elizabeth had orchestrated everything: the attack on the office, Torres's betrayal, even the timing of the pier meeting. But why Shaw? Why now? The Damascus operation flashed through her memory. Shaw had been her agency handler then, the one who'd helped her disappear after everything went wrong. He knew things about Project Perseus that weren't in any official files, just like she did. Alex turned down a narrow alley, cutting between buildings to avoid the main streets where Chimera would be watching. The memory stick felt heavy in her pocket, a weight that had haunted her for 3 years. She hadn't been able to decrypt its contents, but she'd memorized every file name, every piece of metadata. The names meant nothing without context, but she'd seen enough in Damascus to know. It wasn't just another Black Ops program. Perseus was something else entirely. Her phone vibrated. Another encrypted message. "They're watching Samuel, apartment and office under surveillance." Maria Reyes, her emergency contact in Chicago and one of the few people who knew her. True identity. If Maria was warning her about Samuel, the situation was worse than she'd thought. 39 minutes. Alex turned the Ducati toward the industrial district. She had a safe house there, one not even the agency knew about. If she was going to survive the next hour, she needed resources. The safe house was hidden in an abandoned factory, its entrance concealed behind rusted machinery. Alex parked the motorcycle and quickly disabled its tracker. Inside, she moved through the darkness with practiced ease, reaching a hidden panel in the wall. Biometric scanner, retinal scan, DNA verification. The wall slid open silently, revealing a small but well-equipped room. This wasn't just a safe house, it was her contingency plan, prepared during those first paranoid months after Damascus, when she'd known this day might come. "Welcome back, Agent Morgan," a computerized voice greeted her. "It has been 847 days since your last visit." "Hello, Alice," Alex replied, activating the room's systems. "We've got work to do." The AI system, another souvenir from her agency. Days came to life, holographic displays filling the air with data. Alex moved quickly, stripping off her wet clothes and changing into tactical gear, hidden in a wall compartment. "Analysis of the current situation," she asked, checking weapons and equipment. "Facial recognition has identified 14 Chimera. Operators in the vicinity of Navy Pier," Alice responded. "Satellite imagery shows 3 sniper positions already established. Elizabeth Ward's presence was confirmed at 2 locations within the last hour." "She's splitting her forces," Alex mused, loading magazines with precise movements. "Show me Samuel's location." A holographic map appeared, showing a blinking dot moving through the city. "Target is currently at his law office. 2 surveillance. Teams monitoring." No direct threat detected yet. Alex's jaw tightened. Samuel was innocent in all this, just a kind man who'd shown friendship to a woman he thought was a financial analyst. She couldn't let him become collateral damage in Elizabeth's games. Alice, access building schematics for Navy Pier. Show me all entry and exit points with current surveillance coverage. The map shifted, displaying a detailed layout of the pier complex. Red dots indicated Chimera's known positions, while blue highlighted potential escape routes. Multiple civilian visitors are still present despite the late hour, Alice noted. Estimated crowd of 200 plus in the main areas. They're using the civilians as cover, Alex said grimly. Classic Elizabeth. Forced me to limit my options. 28 minutes. She finished gearing up. Reinforced bodysuit under civilian clothes, multiple concealed weapons, comm unit linked to Alice, and enough equipment to handle most scenarios. But equipment wasn't what worried her. Alice, show me everything we have on Marcus Shaw's activities since Damascus. Data scrolled across the displays. Travel records, financial transactions, surveillance photos. Shaw had been busy these past 3 years, moving between agency assignments with increasing frequency. Pattern analysis suggests irregular behavior beginning 3 months ago, Alice reported. Increased secure communications, unusual travel patterns, multiple dead drops activated. He found something, Alex murmured. Something about Perseus. She pulled out the memory stick, inserting it into a secure terminal. The encryption was beyond even Alice's capabilities, but maybe Shaw had made a breakthrough. Maybe that's why Elizabeth wanted them both at Navy Pier. Alice, send a message to Maria. Tell her to get Samuel out of the city. Use Protocol 7. Message. Sent. Warning. Protocol 7 will alert agency monitoring systems. Good. Alex checked her weapons one final time. Let them know something's happening. Maybe they'll actually do their jobs for once. 19 minutes. She moved to a workbench, quickly assembling specialized equipment. Sonic disruptors disguised as phones. EMP charges that could disable electronics in a focused area. Gas pellets filled with a compound that would neutralize. Chimera's favorite tactical drugs. They'll be expecting countermeasures, Alice observed. They'll be expecting agency countermeasures, Alex corrected. These are something special, a little project I've been working on during my retirement. The AI was silent for a moment, processing. You knew this day would come. I hoped it wouldn't. Alex secured the last piece of equipment. But hope isn't a strategy. She pulled up Navy Pier's security feeds, watching Chimera's teams move into position. Their coordination was perfect, their coverage absolute. Elizabeth wasn't taking any chances. 12 minutes, final preparations complete, Alice announced. Would you like me to calculate probable survival rates? When has that ever made a difference? Statistical analysis suggests. Sometimes the numbers lie, Alice. Alex moved toward the exit. Sometimes you have to make your own probability. She paused at the door, looking back at the holographic displays. If I don't return, execute Protocol Omega. Everything goes to Maria. She'll know what to do with it. Understood. The AI hesitated. Agent Morgan, good luck. Alex smiled faintly. Luck's for amateurs. We make our own destiny. She emerged into the rain-soaked night, the weight of her choices settling around her like armor. The Ducati roared to life, its engine echoing off wet concrete as she pointed it toward Navy Pier. 7 minutes until the meeting. 7 minutes to decide who she really was. Alexandra Chen, the woman who'd found peace in normalcy, or Agent Morgan, the operative who'd brought down governments with a whispered word and a well-placed bullet. 7 minutes to choose between the life she'd built and the truth she'd been running from. As she raced through Chicago's gleaming canyons of steel and glass, Alex felt the last pieces of her cover identity falling away. Elizabeth wanted the old Alex Morgan, the one who'd been Chimera's most lethal operative. Be careful what you wish for. The pier's lights grew larger in her vision, a glittering trap laid out before her. Somewhere in that maze of tourists and tacky shops, Shaw was waiting, Elizabeth was watching, and Samuel's life hung in the balance. Time to remind everyone why some ghosts should stay buried. The game was about to change, and Alex Morgan was done playing by anyone's rules but her own. The storm was coming, and this time she was bringing the thunder. Alex parked the Ducati in a shadowy spot between tourist buses, her trained eyes scanning the crowded pier. Even at this late hour, visitors milled about, their laughter and chatter providing perfect cover for any surveillance teams. Through her earpiece, Alice provided continuous updates. 3 new heat signatures detected on the Ferris wheel maintenance platform. Sniper team positioning confirmed. "What about Shaw?" Alex asked quietly, moving through the crowd with practiced casualness. "Target spotted near the Crystal Gardens. 2 visible escorts. Probability of additional backup at 87.4%. The Crystal Gardens, a glass-enclosed botanical space at the pier's center. Elizabeth's choice of location wasn't random. The glass walls offered multiple lines of sight, while the dense foliage provided plenty of hiding spots for her operators. Alex's phone buzzed with a text from Maria. "Samuel secure. Moving to a secondary location. Watch your 6. 1 piece of leverage neutralized, at least temporarily. But knowing Elizabeth, she'd have contingency plans. She always did. Alice, active scan for any biological or chemical agents in the area. Scanning. Multiple aerosol dispersal devices detected in the ventilation systems. Composition unknown, but consistent with Chimera's neural suppressant compounds." Of course, Elizabeth was preparing for every scenario, including the possibility that Alex might try to turn the civilians into chaos cover. 4 minutes until the meeting time. Alex approached the Crystal Gardens, adopting the slight slouch and tired expression of a typical office worker heading home late. Her tactical gear was concealed beneath a fashionable trench coat, weapons hidden but accessible. "Move at 3 o'clock, Alice warned. "Facial recognition confirms Chimera tactical team leader from Damascus, Captain James Reed." Alex remembered. Reed, a former British SAS operator who joined Chimera for the intellectual challenge of their work. He'd been one of the few who'd survived when she'd burned their Damascus facility to the ground. "Just like old times," she murmured, pretending to check her phone as she tracked his movement in its reflection. Reed was good. His tactical team moved through the crowd like ghosts, their presence barely registering to the tourists around them. But Alex was better. She counted 6 operators, their positions creating a subtle net designed to herd her toward the gardens. 2 minutes. She entered the Crystal Gardens, the humid air hitting her like a wall. The space was beautiful. Tropical plants and delicate flowers creating a maze of green punctuated by small waterfalls. The perfect kill box. Shaw stood near the central fountain, his silver hair and expensive suit making him look like any other wealthy businessman enjoying the view. But Alex noted the slight tension in his shoulders, the way his hand stayed near his jacket pocket. "Hello, Morgan," he said without turning. "Right on time." "You know me, Shaw. I hate to disappoint." She stopped several feet away, positioning herself with clear sightlines to the main entrances. "Though I have to say, your choice of meeting spots leaves something to be desired. Wasn't my choice." He finally turned to face her. He'd aged in the past 3 years, new lines creasing his face. "But then, neither of us is really in control of this situation, are we?" "Speak for yourself." Alex kept her voice light, even, as she tracked multiple threats converging on their position. "I assume Elizabeth shared her terms." Shaw's expression tightened. "She wants the stick, Says you've had 3 years to decrypt it with no success. Time to let the experts handle it. And you believe that's all she wants? What I believe stopped mattering a long time ago. He glanced at his watch. We have about 30 seconds before her teams move into position. Whatever you're planning, now would be the time. Alex smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Who says I'm planning anything? Because I trained you, Morgan, and you never walk into a trap without the lights went out. Not just in the Crystal Gardens, but across the entire pier. Emergency systems kicked in, but they too failed, plunging everything into darkness. In the distance, car alarms began blaring as their electronics were disrupted. Right on schedule, Alex said softly. The EMP she'd planted on her way in had just knocked out every piece of electronic equipment within half a mile, including Chimera's tactical gear, communications, and those aerosol dispersal devices Alice had detected. Chaos erupted as tourists panicked in the sudden darkness. Alex was already moving, grabbing Shaw's arm and pulling him toward a maintenance door she'd marked earlier. Your plan is a blackout, Shaw demanded as they ran. No, Alex replied. My plan is this. She pulled out her phone, specially shielded against the EMP, and pressed a sequence of buttons. Across the pier, small charges she'd planted during her approach detonated, creating a series of controlled explosions that shattered windows and triggered fire alarms. The crowd's panic turned to terror. People ran in all directions, unwittingly disrupting Chimera's carefully planned containment positions. Jesus, Morgan, Shaw muttered. You haven't lost your touch. You haven't seen anything yet. They burst through the maintenance door into a service corridor. In the dim emergency lighting, Alex could see Shaw was carrying something, a small metal case handcuffed to his wrist. What's in the case? The key to everything. Shaw's breathing was labored as they ran. Why did Perseus really fail in Damascus? Why is Elizabeth so desperate to get that memory stick? It's all connected. Care to be more specific? Not here. He glanced behind them. Let's just say Project Perseus wasn't about creating super soldiers. It was about creating something much worse. They reached a junction in the corridor. Alex held up her hand, listening. Multiple footsteps echoed from both directions. Chimeras, teams adapting to the blackout, falling back on trained search patterns. They're boxing us in, Shaw observed. Good. Alex pulled out one of her special grenades. That's exactly what I want them to do. The footsteps grew closer. Alex could hear Reed barking orders, coordinating his teams through backup radio frequencies. Morgan, Shaw said quietly, if they get this case, if they complete what they started in Damascus, they won't. You don't understand. Elizabeth, she's not just trying to revive Perseus. She's evolved it. The genetic markers, the prototype implementation, it's all been leading to this. Alex turned to face him, really looking at him for the first time. There was fear in his eyes, not of Chimera, but of something else. What did you find, Shaw? Before he could answer, the corridor erupted in gunfire. Reed's teams had night vision backup, operating on isolated power supplies. Alex pushed Shaw behind her, returning fire with precise bursts that forced the operators to take cover. Whatever's in that case, she said, whatever Perseus has become, Elizabeth isn't getting it. Not today. She pulled the pin on her grenade, letting it roll toward the advancing teams. But this wasn't a normal explosive. It was filled with a compound of her own design, created during those long nights in her safe house. The grenade detonated with a soft pop, releasing a cloud of silver mist. The operator's reaction was immediate. Their movements became sluggish, uncoordinated. What the hell? Shaw breathed. Let's just say I did some experimenting during my retirement. Alex grabbed his arm again. That compound targets the same neural pathways as Chimera's enhancement drugs. Turn their own chemistry against them. They ran as sounds of confusion and chaos erupted behind them. But Alex knew it wouldn't last long. Elizabeth would have countermeasures, contingencies. She always did. The game was evolving, the stakes rising, with every passing second. But as they raced through the darkness, Alex felt a familiar fire in her veins. Elizabeth wanted to play with genetics and neural enhancement. Fine. Time to show her what a naturally enhanced operative could really do. The hunt was on, and Alex Morgan was just getting started. The maintenance tunnels beneath Navy Pier echoed with the sounds of pursuit as Alex and Shaw descended deeper into the labyrinth of service corridors. The metal case handcuffed to Shaw's wrist clicked rhythmically against the railing as they moved, its contents a mystery that had already cost too many lives. "We need to stop," Shaw gasped, his face pale with exertion. "I have to show you what's in the case." "Keep moving," Alex replied. Her senses alert for any sign of Chimera teams. Elizabeth's people will have regrouped by now. "You don't understand." Shaw pulled them to a halt in a narrow junction of pipes and electrical conduits. "What's in this case? It's why I contacted you. Why do I let them track me here?" Alex checked their surroundings, marking possible escape routes. Through her earpiece, Alice provided updates on movement patterns above them. "Multiple teams converging on maintenance access points," the AI reported. "Thermal imaging shows they're using a search grid pattern." Shaw fumbled with the case's lock, his hands shaking slightly. 3 years ago in Damascus, you found something on that memory stick, something that scared you enough to run. I remember." Alex kept her voice steady, though the memories of that night flashed through her mind. The facility in flames, the screams, the things she'd seen in those underground labs. What you found was only part of it. Shaw finally opened the case, revealing a set of medical slides and a small tablet hardened against EMPs. This is what they were really working on. Alex glanced at the slides. Even in the dim emergency lighting, she could see they contained tissue samples, each marked with a series of numbers and codes. Genetic samples? From the Perseus test subjects. Shaw activated the tablet, bringing up a series of complex molecular diagrams. But not just any samples. They show what happened when the subject's DNA was exposed to the compound. Alex studied the images, her trained mind processing the implications. These patterns, they're not random mutations. No, Shaw's voice was grim. They're designed changes, evolution by design. Elizabeth wasn't trying to create super soldiers. She was trying to create the next stage of human development. A distant explosion shook the tunnels, followed by the sound of boots on metal grating. Chimera was getting closer. "We need to move," Alex said, but Shaw grabbed her arm. "Listen to me. The compound doesn't just enhance physical capabilities. It rewrites genetic code at a fundamental level, creating changes that can be passed down to future generations. They're trying to force human evolution." And the memory stick contains the original formula, the one that worked. Shaw quickly repacked the case. Everything since then has been an attempt to recreate it. That's why Elizabeth wants it so badly. That's why gunfire erupted from both ends of the tunnel. Alex shoved Shaw down behind a pipe junction as bullets sparked off metal around them. Through the chaos, she heard a familiar voice. "Agent Morgan!" Reed's cultured British accent carried clearly. "That compound of yours was impressive, but did you really think we wouldn't adapt?" "Actually," Alex called back, "I was counting on it." She pulled out another specially designed grenade, this one containing a different compound. The first had been a test, confirming her theories about Chimera's neural enhancements. This one was the real weapon. "Shaw," she said quietly, "when I throw this, run for the southeast tunnel. Don't stop. Don't look back. They'll be waiting. Trust me." She could see Chimera operators moving into position, their tactical gear gleaming dully in the emergency lights. Reed was coordinating them with hand signals, setting up a classic crossfire pattern. "Last chance, Morgan!" Reed shouted. "Elizabeth wants you alive, but accidents do happen." Alex smiled grimly. "Give Elizabeth a message for me." She threw the grenade, but not at the operators. Instead, it hit a specific point on the ceiling where several pipes converged. The device detonated with a sharp crack, releasing a cloud of silvery vapor just as the pipes burst. The reaction was immediate and violent. The compound, designed to be activated by water, created a rapidly expanding foam that filled the tunnel. But this wasn't ordinary containment foam. It carried a powerful sedative designed specifically to counteract Chimera's enhancement drugs. Now! Alex pushed Shaw toward the southeast tunnel as chaos erupted. Operators caught in the foam began, collapsing, their enhanced physiology working against them as the sedative took hold. Bloody hell! Reed's voice was muffled by the expanding barrier. "Fall back! Fall!" Alex didn't wait to hear the rest. She ran after Shaw, her mind already planning their next move. The foam would buy them minutes at most. Elizabeth would have countermeasures for this too. They emerged into a larger maintenance area filled with electrical equipment. Shaw was breathing heavily, the case bouncing against his leg as they moved. "That foam," he gasped. "How did you—" "I had 3 years to study what I found in Damascus," Alex replied, checking angles and exits. "Plenty of time to develop countermeasures." "You knew they'd come for you eventually. I knew Elizabeth would never let it go." Alex activated her comm. "Alice, status update. Multiple teams are still converging on your position," the AI reported. "Thermal imaging shows movement patterns consistent with cornering tactics. They're herding you toward the pier's central support structure." "Of course they are." Alex pulled out her phone, bringing up the pier's structural plans. "Because that's exactly where Elizabeth is waiting." Shaw leaned against a power junction box, his face gleaming with sweat. "How can you be so sure?" "Because it's what I would do." Alex studied the plans, her mind racing through possibilities. The central support has the best defensive position, clear lines of sight, and only 2 viable escape routes, both of which they'll have covered. "Exactly." Alex smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Which is why we're not going to use either of them." She moved to a nearby electrical panel, quickly bypassing its security systems. Inside, a maze of wires and circuit breakers controlled power distribution for this section of the pier. "What are you doing?" "Creating option 3. Alex began rerouting connections, her movements precise and practiced. "Elizabeth thinks she knows how I operate, knows what I'll do. But she forgot something important." "What's that?" "I'm not the same person who left Damascus." Alex finished her modifications, then pulled out one of her remaining EMP devices. "I've had 3 years to plan for this moment, 3 years to become something new." She attached the device to the modified panel, setting its timer. "The question isn't whether I can escape her trap. The question is whether she's ready for what I've become." Footsteps echoed from multiple directions, Chimera teams moving into final position. Through her earpiece, Alice provided a steady stream of updates on their movements. "They're sealing off all access points," the AI reported. "Thermal imaging shows 20+ operators converging on your location." "Perfect." Alex checked her weapons and remaining equipment. "Sure. That case, what else is in it? What aren't you telling me?" He hesitated, then reached into the case's hidden compartment. "This." He pulled out a small vial filled with amber liquid. The only surviving sample of the original compound, the one that worked. Alex stared at the vial, memories of Damascus flooding back. The test subjects, their bodies twisted by failed versions of that same compound. The screams that still haunted her dreams. Why bring it here? Why risk everything? Because it's not just about genetic enhancement anymore. Shaw's voice was urgent. Elizabeth, she found a way to weaponize it, to spread the changes through environmental exposure. If she gets this sample, if she completes her work, She could force evolution on a massive scale, Alex finished. Create her own version of humanity's next step. Exactly. Shaw handed her the vial. That's why I had to find you. You're the only one who might be able to stop her. Alex tucked the vial securely away, just as the first shots rang out. Chimera teams had reached their position, their movements coordinated and precise. Touching reunion, Elizabeth's voice echoed through the maintenance area. But I'm afraid time's up. Alex pushed Shaw behind a concrete pillar as bullets sparked off metal around them. Through the chaos, she could see Elizabeth standing on an elevated platform, surrounded by guards. Did you really think I wouldn't find you? Elizabeth called out. That I wouldn't eventually get what I need? Actually, Alex replied, her finger hovering over her phone screen. I was counting on it. She triggered the EMP device. But this time, something different happened. The device, combined with her modifications to the electrical panel, didn't just kill power. It created a cascading surge that raced through the pier's power grid, overloading systems in a specific pattern. Explosions rocked the structure as transformers blew. Emergency generators kicked in, only to be overwhelmed by the surge. And in the chaos, Alex Morgan prepared to show Elizabeth exactly what she'd become. The real game was about to begin, and this time, evolution wouldn't be the only thing changing. You've lost your touch, Elizabeth, Alex called out, as electrical systems exploded around them. 3 years ago, you would have seen this coming. The maintenance area had become a maze of shadows and emergency lighting, sparks raining down from damaged equipment. Through the chaos, Alex could see Elizabeth's expression harden. And you've become predictable, Elizabeth replied. EMP devices, chemical compounds, is that really the best you can do? Alex smiled as she checked the time on her phone. No, this is. The surge she'd created wasn't just about disrupting power. It was about timing. As the electrical systems overloaded in sequence, they created a domino effect through the pier's infrastructure. Water pipes burst, steam lines ruptured, and structural supports groaned under sudden stress. Multiple structural failures detected, Alice reported in her ear. Pattern matching predicted scenario Alpha 7. What have you done? Shaw whispered, watching as chaos unfolded around them. Give us a chance. Alex pulled out her last 2 specially designed grenades. Elizabeth thinks she knows every move I'll make, but she forgot the most important lesson she ever taught me. Which is? Sometimes the best way to escape a trap, Alex pulled the pins, is to destroy it completely. She threw the grenades not at the Chimera teams, but at specific points in the infrastructure she'd already weakened. The devices detonated, releasing clouds of her modified compound. But this time, when it mixed with the water from the burst pipes, it created something new. Chemical reaction detected, Alice announced. Compound is behaving as designed. Structural integrity of affected areas is decreasing rapidly. Elizabeth's eyes widened as she realized what was happening. Fall back! Everyone fall! The floor beneath her platform suddenly gave way, concrete crumbling like sugar as Alex's compound did its work. Elizabeth leaped to safety, but several of her guards weren't as quick. You see, Alex said, moving through the chaos. With practiced grace. While you were busy planning this elaborate trap, I was studying chemistry, specifically how certain compounds interact with construction materials. She fired precise shots, not at people, but at key structural points. Each bullet impact, combined with her compound, accelerated the deterioration. Teams 3 and 4, contain them! Elizabeth shouted, but her operators were struggling with the rapidly changing battlefield. The floor was becoming unstable, walls were crumbling, and Alex's compound was making standard tactical movements impossible. This is what you've been doing. Elizabeth's voice carried a note of genuine surprise. Playing chemist in your spare time? Among other things, Alex grabbed Shaw's arm, guiding him toward a specific path she'd mapped out. "You taught me to always have a backup plan. I just took it a step further. The maintenance area was coming. Apart around them, but not randomly. Alex had spent months studying the pier's architecture, calculating load-bearing points and structural weaknesses. Each explosion, each chemical reaction, was part of a carefully orchestrated symphony of destruction. "The southeast corridor is clear," Alice reported. "Structural collapse will reach a critical point in 47 seconds. "Time to go," Alex told Shaw, but he hesitated. "The case," he said. "If they get it, they won't." A massive section of ceiling collapsed between them and Elizabeth's position, temporarily cutting off pursuit. Alex used the opportunity to inject Shaw with something from a small auto-injector. "What?" he started, but his eyes were already growing heavy. "Insurance," she said, catching him as he slumped. "Can't have you slowing us down." She lifted him with practiced efficiency, noting that the case was still securely handcuffed to his wrist. Behind them, she could hear Elizabeth barking orders, reorganizing her teams for pursuit. "Alice, execute Protocol Omega-3. Acknowledged. Thermal imaging shows multiple teams attempting to flank your position. Time to structural failure. 30 seconds. Alex moved quickly through the disintegrating maintenance area, carrying Shaw and avoiding the worst of the collapse. Her compound had turned portions of the floor into an unstable mess, but she knew exactly where to step. "Morgan!" Elizabeth's voice carried over the sound of falling debris. "This isn't over." "Actually," Alex called back, "it is. Check your files on Damascus, specifically what happened to the east wing of the facility." She heard Elizabeth's sharp intake of breath as understanding dawned. The east wing, where Alex had first tested an early version of her compound, creating a chain reaction that had brought the entire structure down. "You wouldn't," Elizabeth said. "Not with civilians above." "The pier's been evacuated," Alex replied. "Your teams made sure of that. The only people at risk are the ones who chose to be here." She reached her targeted exit point just as the final stage of collapse began. The maintenance area was coming apart completely now, floors buckling and walls crumbling as her compound finished its work. "All teams clear the area." Elizabeth's order came too late. Sections of the pier above them were starting to sink as support structures failed. Alex carried Shaw through a maintenance shaft she'd prepared earlier, emerging into the cool night air near the pier's edge. A boat was waiting. Another piece of her elaborate contingency plan. "Full structural collapse imminent," Alice reported. "Thermal imaging shows multiple teams still trapped in affected areas." "Send an anonymous tip to emergency services," Alex said, securing Shaw in the boat. "Give them the locations of anyone still inside." Even Elizabeth's teams. Especially them. Alex started the boat's engine. "They made their choices, but that doesn't mean they deserve to die." As they pulled away from the pier, the sound of collapse reached a crescendo. Sections of the structure began falling into the lake, creating waves that rocked their small craft. Alex looked back at the destruction, knowing Elizabeth had likely survived. She was too good, too prepared to be taken out so easily, but that hadn't been the point. "Alice, analyze all data from the operation. I want to know everything about how they found me, how they tracked Shaw, and what else they might have planned." Analysis. Underway. Preliminary results suggest this was not an isolated operation. Multiple similar incidents detected worldwide in the past month. Alex nodded, her mind already processing the implications. Elizabeth wasn't just after the Damascus package. She was activating multiple operations simultaneously, which meant whatever Project Perseus had become, it was ready to move forward. Shaw stirred slightly in his drugged sleep, the case still securely attached to his wrist. Inside it, tissue samples and data that could change the course of human evolution, and in Alex's pocket, a vial containing the key to it all, The game was evolving, becoming something bigger than just a hunt for a former operative. Elizabeth wasn't just trying to recreate her success from Damascus, she was preparing to implement it on a global scale. As their boat cut through the dark waters of Lake Michigan, Alex Morgan allowed herself a grim smile. Elizabeth wanted to force the next step in human evolution? Fine, time to show her what real evolution looked like. The hunt was just beginning. And this time, Alex wasn't running away. She was running straight at them. The lake winds whipped across the boat's bow as Alex navigated through Chicago's dark waters, keeping to the shadows of larger vessels. In the distance, emergency vehicles' lights painted the collapsed section of Navy Pier in strobing reds and blues. Shaw remained unconscious, the case handcuffed to his wrist, containing secrets worth killing for. Multiple pursuit craft detected, Alice reported through Alex's earpiece. 3 high-speed vessels approaching from the southwest. Heat signatures suggest Chimera tactical teams. Alex checked her GPS, marking their position relative to her next safe house. An abandoned water treatment facility on the city's industrial outskirts. Time to intercept? 4 minutes at current speed. They're using stealth boats, military grade. Of course they are. Alex adjusted their course, heading toward a maze of commercial docks and shipping containers. What about aerial surveillance? 2 helicopters maintaining distance, running dark. Pattern suggests they're waiting for you to reach shore. Alex's mind raced through options as she pushed the boat's engine harder. The water treatment facility was secure, but getting there meant running a gauntlet of Chimera forces. And she had an unconscious passenger to protect. Her phone vibrated. Another encrypted message from Maria. Samuel secured a secondary location, but we've got company watching. They know about him. Alex's jaw tightened. Elizabeth was moving faster than expected, expanding her web of leverage. First Shaw, now Samuel. She was systematically targeting everyone Alex had ever connected with. Alice, activate Protocol Sigma at the treatment facility. Full defensive measures. Acknowledged. Warning. Protocol Sigma will be detectable by standard surveillance. Chimera will know the location. That's what I'm counting on. The pursuing boats were closing fast, their engines barely audible thanks to advanced stealth technology. But Alex hadn't spent 3 years just playing chemist. She'd studied naval tactics, memorized Chicago's waterways, and prepared for exactly this scenario. She reached beneath the boat's console, pulling out a small device she'd installed months ago. It looked like a standard marine radio, but its purpose was far more specific. Time to see if this works, she muttered, activating the device. It sent out a specialized sonic pulse, not harmful to humans, but devastating to the kind of stealth technology Chimera favored. The effect was immediate. One of the pursuing boats suddenly veered off course, its engine sputtering as the pulse disrupted its systems. The other 2 adjusted their approach, switching to backup systems, but it had bought her precious seconds. Interesting, Elizabeth's voice crackled over their radio. You've learned some new tricks, but do you really think technology alone will save you? Actually, Alex replied, guiding their boat into a narrow channel between cargo ships, I'm counting on you thinking exactly that. She activated another device, this one releasing a trail of her specialized compound into the water. In the dark, it was nearly invisible, just a slightly different shade of black in the murky depths. Second wave of pursuit craft detected, Alice reported. They're trying to box you in. Perfect. Alex checked Shaw's vitals, still stable, the sedative working exactly as designed. Time to show them why you don't chase someone through their home territory. The pursuing boats entered the channel, their operators professionally cautious but confident in their superior numbers and equipment. They didn't notice how the water around them was changing, becoming thicker, more resistant. Alex's compound was designed to react with specific minerals common in Lake Michigan. When activated by the motion of boat propellers, it created a rapidly expanding foam that could disable engines and foul propellers. The first boat's engine died with a stuttering whine. The second quickly followed, its propellers tangled in the suddenly viscous water. The third managed to avoid the worst of it, but had to veer off to avoid collision with its stranded companions. "That's 2 tricks." Elizabeth's voice was tight with controlled anger. "Care to try for 3? Oh, I'm just getting started." Alex guided their boat through a complex series of turns, using the cargo ships as cover. "You taught me to always have contingencies for my contingencies, remember? I taught you a lot of things, including what happens to people who betray Chimera." "Funny thing about betrayal," Alex replied, checking their position. "Almost there. It works both ways. Damascus taught me that." She could hear Elizabeth's sharp intake of breath. The mission in Damascus was still a raw nerve, the moment when everything had changed, when Alex had discovered the truth about Project Perseus and made her choice. "You never understood what we were trying to achieve," Elizabeth said. "The next step in human evolution. Save the speeches," Alex cut her off. "I saw your next step in those labs, saw what you did to those people. That wasn't evolution, it was playing God." They emerged from the channel into open water. Ahead, the water treatment facility's dark bulk loomed against the sky. Its windows were dark, its grounds apparently abandoned, exactly as Alex had designed it to appear. "Approaching target location," Alice reported. "Protocol Sigma activated and running. Defense systems online." "You're slipping, Morgan." Elizabeth's voice held a note of triumph. "Leading us right to your safe house? That's not like you." Alex smiled grimly as she guided their boat toward a partially submerged intake pipe, the facility's original water source, now modified for her purposes. "Maybe I'm not as clever as I used to be," she replied. 3 years of civilian life can do that. The pursuing boats were regrouping, coordinating their approach with the helicopters above. They thought they had her cornered, trapped between them and the shore, with nowhere left to run. Time to show them how wrong they were. Alex activated her final water-based surprise, a series of underwater charges she'd planted months ago. The explosions weren't large, but they created a complex pattern of waves that disrupted the pursuit vessel's formation. "Alice, status of facility defenses. All systems are green. Internal temperature adjusted as specified. Security measures are armed and ready." Alex guided their boat into the intake pipe, its specially modified engine allowing them to navigate the narrow space. Behind them, she could hear Elizabeth barking orders, directing her teams to surround the facility. "They're really going to hate what comes next," she muttered, securing shore as they entered the pipe's darkness. The boat's journey through the intake system was brief but complex, following a route Alex had carefully mapped and modified. They emerged into a partially flooded chamber beneath the facility, a receiving area she'd spent months preparing. "Multiple teams breaching the facility perimeter," Alice reported. "Thermal imaging shows standard sweep and clear patterns." "How many?" 24. Operators divided into 6 teams, 2 helicopter gunships maintaining overwatch. Elizabeth is coordinating from a command vehicle outside the main gate. Alex efficiently secured their boat and lifted shore onto a waiting gurney. The case was still firmly attached to his wrist. Good. They'd need what was inside it later. "Begin." "Facility lockdown," she ordered, pushing the gurney toward a reinforced elevator. "Initiate containment protocols on my mark." "Acknowledged." "Warning, containment protocols will seal all access points. Emergency services will be unable to assist if that won't be necessary." Alex checked her remaining equipment as the elevator rose. "No one's going to want to come near. This place, once we're done, The elevator opened onto a sprawling laboratory space, not the makeshift setup in her previous safe house, but a fully equipped facility. This was where she'd spent countless nights developing her compounds, studying the data from Damascus and preparing for exactly this moment. Teams approaching primary lab space, Alice reported. 3 minutes to contact. Alex secured Shaw in a protected room, making sure his vital signs were stable. The case would stay with him, safer there than with her for what came next. "Time to welcome our guests," she said, moving to a central control station. "Let's show them what 3 years of preparation looks like." She activated the facility's main systems, bringing banks of equipment humming to life. But these weren't normal laboratory devices. Each one was part of an elaborate trap, designed specifically to counter Chimera's enhanced operators. "You know what your real problem is, Elizabeth?" Alex spoke into her radio as she made final adjustments. "You always assume everyone thinks like you, always believe they'll follow your playbook. And you think you're different?" Elizabeth's voice was cold. "You're surrounded, Morgan. Your facility is compromised. Whatever tricks you've prepared, that's exactly what I mean." Alex smiled as she watched Chimera's teams move through her facility on security feeds. "You think this is about tricks, about technology and tactics." She initiated the first phase of her defense protocols. Throughout the facility, hidden systems began releasing a carefully calibrated mixture of compounds into the air. "But sometimes," she continued, "the best trap is the one your enemy walks into willingly." The game was changing, and Alex Morgan was done playing defense. It was time to show Elizabeth exactly what evolution looked like. The facility's security feeds showed Chimera's teams moving with practiced precision through the corridors, their tactical gear gleaming under emergency lights. They were professionals, methodically clearing each room, but Alex noted the subtle signs of enhanced physiology in their movements. Too fast, too precise to be natural. "Target located," one team leader reported over their comms. "Central laboratory. Level 2. Maintain containment protocols," Elizabeth's voice replied. "Morgan's lab rats from Damascus proved how dangerous she can be when cornered." Alex watched them converge on her position, her fingers dancing across the control panel. The compounds she'd released were already at work, though the operators wouldn't realize it yet. Each breath they took brought them closer to the trap's completion. "You know what's fascinating about human enhancement?" She spoke into the facility's comm system, her voice echoing through the corridors. "The body's remarkable ability to adapt, to evolve in response to threats." "More biology lessons?" Elizabeth's tone was dismissive. "I expected better from you. That's your problem, Elizabeth. You never did appreciate the subtle approach." Alex activated another set of controls, adjusting environmental parameters throughout the facility. "You were so focused on forcing evolution that you missed its true power." The first signs were beginning to show. Some operators were shaking their hands, adjusting their grips on their weapons. Others were blinking rapidly, their enhanced vision beginning to falter. "Teams 2 and 4, status report," Elizabeth barked. "Something's wrong," one operator replied, his voice tense. "The enhancements, they're not responding correctly." Alex allowed herself a small smile. 3 years is a long time to study something, Elizabeth. Long enough to understand exactly how your enhancement compounds work. Long enough to learn how to turn them against themselves. The air in the facility was now thick with her counteragents, chemicals designed to interact specifically with Chimera's enhancement drugs, not to neutralize them, but to modify them in subtle, devastating ways. "What have you done?" Elizabeth's voice held the first trace of uncertainty. "I learned from Damascus," Alex replied, watching as more operators began to struggle. "Learn how your compounds alter neural pathways, enhance muscle response, sharpen senses. And then I learned how to reverse engineer all of it. On the security feeds, she could see the effects spreading. Enhanced strength became uncontrollable tremors. Heightened senses transformed into sensory overload. Perfect coordination dissolved into chaos. "Pull them out," Elizabeth ordered, but it was too late. The operators' own bodies were betraying them, their enhanced systems turning inward. None of the effects were lethal. Alex wasn't interested in killing them. This was about sending a message. "Fascinating thing about evolution," Alex continued, moving through her lab as the chaos unfolded. "It's not always about getting stronger. Sometimes it's about adaptation, about turning your enemy's strength into their weakness." She reached a sealed door at the back of the lab, entering a complex code. Inside was her real work, not just countermeasures, but something more, something that would change everything. "You wanted to force the next step in human evolution," she said, retrieving a small case from the secure room. "But you never understood what evolution really means. It's not about control, it's about change, adaptation, survival." The case contained vials of a compound she'd developed using data from the Damascus memory stick. Not Elizabeth's brute force approach to enhancement, but something more elegant, more natural. "Your operators will recover," she told Elizabeth as she packed the vials carefully. "The effects are temporary. Consider it a demonstration." "Of what?" Elizabeth's voice was tight with fury. "What happens when you underestimate your opponents?" Alex checked Shaw's vital signs again, still stable. "You spent 3 years hunting me, thinking I was hiding, running. But I wasn't running, Elizabeth, I was evolving." Through the windows, she could see Chimera's helicopters circling, their searchlights cutting through the darkness. Elizabeth would have backup teams waiting, ones not enhanced and therefore not vulnerable to her compounds. But that was part of the plan too. "Alice, initiate final containment protocols. Acknowledged. Warning, structural integrity will be compromised." Perfect. Throughout the facility, hidden charges detonated, not explosives, but devices designed to release massive amounts of her compounds into the Foundation itself. The same chemicals that had brought down sections of Navy Pier began their work on the treatment facility structure. "You're destroying your own safe house?" Elizabeth's disbelief was clear. "No," Alex replied, lifting Shaw's gurney as she headed for a hidden exit. "I'm destroying your evidence. Everything in this facility, all my research, all my work, it's already compromised. Time to start fresh." The building was beginning to groan as support structures weakened. Chimera's operators, still struggling with the effects of her compounds, were being evacuated by their unaffected colleagues. "This isn't over, Morgan." Elizabeth's voice held a deadly promise. "For once, we agree." Alex guided the gurney into a reinforced tunnel she'd prepared years ago. "But next time we meet, remember this. You're not the only one who's evolved." As she sealed the tunnel entrance behind them, Alex could hear the facility beginning to collapse. Another cache of research destroyed, another safe haven sacrificed. But it was worth it for what she'd learned, what she'd gained. The game wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about evolution, not Elizabeth's forced version, but true adaptation, true change. And Alex Morgan had just shown her firsthand. The real question was, what would Elizabeth do next? The hunt was entering a new phase. And this time, both predator and prey had evolved into something new, something dangerous. The maintenance tunnel stretched ahead of them, its reinforced walls designed to withstand the collapse happening above. Alex pushed Shaw's gurney steadily forward, her mind already processing their next moves. Behind them, the sounds of destruction grew fainter as the treatment facility crumbled into Lake Michigan. "Pursuit status?" she asked Alice through her earpiece. "Chimera teams regrouping at multiple surface locations. Elizabeth has deployed unenhanced operators to establish a search grid. Satellite imagery shows 3 quick response units moving to cover probable exit points." Alex smiled grimly. But not this one. The tunnel was her masterpiece of misdirection, a feat of engineering that had taken months to construct in secret. It appeared on no city plans, interconnected with no known infrastructure. As far as the world was concerned, it didn't exist. Shaw stirred on the gurney, the sedative beginning to wear off. What happened? Short version. We escaped a trap, demonstrated some new tricks, and destroyed my backup lab. Alex checked his pulse, steady and strong. How's your head? Like I drank at a liquor store. He tried to sit up and noticed the case still handcuffed to his wrist. The samples? Safe. Unlike us, if we don't keep moving. She helped him stand, supporting his weight as the sedative's effects lingered. Think you can walk? Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. Alex's voice held an edge of dark humor. It's just that some choices end with Elizabeth's people dissecting us in a lab. They moved deeper into the tunnel, Shaw gradually regaining his strength. The passage sloped gently downward, following a careful route Alex had mapped to avoid all major utility lines and transportation infrastructure. That compound you used on their operators, Shaw said as they walked. It targeted their enhancements. Specifically, among other things, Alex kept her pace steady, measuring their progress. 3 years studying Chimera's work gave me insights into how their compounds interact with human physiology, how to disrupt them. And the samples in this case? He lifted his cuffed wrist. Could they help you develop more countermeasures? Alex glanced at him sharply. Something in his tone triggered warning bells in her mind. Why do you ask? Before he could answer, Alice's voice cut in. Warning. Unauthorized access detected in facility network archives. Remote infiltration attempt in progress. Elizabeth's people. Alex was already pulling out her phone, accessing backup systems. Negative. Signal origin does not match known Chimera protocols. Shaw's expression remained carefully neutral, but Alex saw the slight tension in his shoulders. She stopped walking, turning to face him fully. Something you want to tell me, Marcus? He met her gaze steadily. You're not the only one who's been busy these past 3 years. The agency. When? He didn't respond. Alex's suspicions crystallized. No, someone else. Someone who knew about Damascus, about Perseus. Alex. She moved with explosive speed, pinning him against the tunnel wall. Despite years behind a desk, her combat skills hadn't dulled. Who are you really working for? The same people who helped you disappear after Damascus. Shaw didn't resist her hold. The same ones who've been watching Elizabeth's operation grow. Project Perseus isn't just about human enhancement anymore. It's evolved into something bigger. Your Black Echo, Alex said softly, the pieces falling into place. The shadowy organization that had helped her create her new identity, that had protected her while she built her cover. You've been their asset this whole time. We prefer independent contractor. Shaw managed a weak smile. And right now, we're the only ones with the resources to stop what Elizabeth is planning. Alex released him, her mind racing through implications. Black Echo was legendary in intelligence circles, a private organization that operated in the spaces between agencies, cleaning up messes that governments couldn't officially acknowledge. The tissue samples, she said, they're not just for studying the Perseus effects. You want to use them to create a cure. Shaw rubbed his wrist where she'd gripped it, a way to reverse what Elizabeth's done to her test subjects and to prevent what she's planning next. Before Alex could respond, Alice's voice returned. Multiple breach points detected in tunnel structure. Seismic sensors indicate drilling equipment. They found us. Alex checked her phone's display, multiple teams converging on their position from above. Elizabeth must have thermal imaging drones scanning the area. There's more, Shaw said grimly. The case. It's not just carrying samples and data. Of course it isn't. Alex was already moving, pulling him along. What else? A beacon, one that Black Echo can track? He had the grace to look embarrassed. We needed to make sure the samples reached our people. And now, Chimera can track it too. Alex's mind raced through options as the sounds of drilling grew closer. Alice, how many teams? 4 surface teams. With heavy equipment, 2 additional teams approaching tunnel endpoints. Total operator count, 30 plus. Alex reached into her pack, pulling out what looked like small silver spheres. Time to show them another new trick. What are those? Insurance. She placed the spheres at strategic points along the tunnel walls. Your friends at Black Echo aren't the only ones who've been developing new toys. The drilling sounds were getting closer, concrete dust falling from the ceiling as multiple breach points were created. Alex could hear the distinctive whine of plasma cutters. Chimera was using military-grade equipment to cut through her reinforced walls. The beacon in that case, she said as they moved. Is it quantum encrypted? Shaw nodded. Latest Black Echo tech. Almost impossible to detect unless you know exactly what to look for. Almost impossible isn't good enough. Alex pulled out her phone, accessing specialized scanning software she'd developed. Elizabeth has resources we don't know about, technologies that shouldn't exist yet, like what she was developing in Damascus. Worse, Alex found what she was looking for, a subtle energy signature emanating from the case. She's not just trying to enhance humans anymore, she's trying to reshape reality itself. The first breach. Charge detonated above them, blasting through the tunnel ceiling. Rubble rained down as Chimera operators began rappelling into the passage. Time to go. Alex triggered her silver spheres as she pulled Shaw toward a maintenance alcove. The devices activated with a soft hum, releasing a specialized form of her. In compound, one designed not just to affect enhanced operators, but to change the very structure of the air around them. Breach teams, report! Elizabeth's voice crackled over their captured radio. Do you have them? The response was chaos. The compound had created a localized distortion effect, bending light and sound in ways that made accurate targeting impossible. Operators fired at shadows that weren't there, while others became disoriented in the shifting environment. What did you do? Shaw whispered, watching the confusion through the alcove's grating. Showed them that chemistry isn't just about biological enhancement. Alex was already working on the alcove's hidden panel, revealing another passage beyond. Sometimes it's about changing the rules of engagement entirely. They slipped into the new tunnel as Chimera's team struggled with the distortion effect. Behind them, Alex could hear Elizabeth barking orders, trying to regain control of the situation. Your compound, Shaw said as they moved. It's not just affecting their perception, it's doing something to the physical space itself. Elizabeth's not the only one who's made breakthroughs. Alex's voice was grim. Damascus showed us what's possible when you push the boundaries of science. I just chose to explore different boundaries. The new tunnel led them deeper into Chicago's underground maze, following a route that even Black Echo's detailed maps wouldn't show. Alex had spent years preparing this network, creating paths that existed in the spaces between official infrastructure. Alice, status of pursuit teams? Compound effects maintain at 80% efficiency. Thermal imaging disrupted by environmental distortions. However, multiple teams are attempting to triangulate the beacon's signal. They're persistent, Shaw observed. They're desperate. Alex checked their position on her modified GPS. Elizabeth wouldn't commit this many resources unless she was running out of time. What do you mean? Think about it. The attack on my office, the ambush at Navy Pier, this tunnel assault, all within hours of each other. She's not just trying to capture us. She's racing against something. Shaw's expression darkened. The evolution protocol. The what? Phase 3 of Project Perseus. Black Echo's intelligence suggests Elizabeth is preparing for a major operation, something that will make Damascus look like a test run. Before Alex could respond, the tunnel ahead of them exploded. Concrete and steel gave way as a massive drilling machine burst through the wall, its industrial bits still spinning. Down! Alex shoved Shaw aside as debris filled the passage. Through the dust, she could see Chimera. Operators emerging from the breach, their weapons trained on their position. Enough games, Morgan. Elizabeth's voice carried clearly over the drilling machine's whine. You've had your fun. Show us your new tricks, but you're not the only one who's evolved. The operators moved with uncanny precision, their movements suggesting a new kind of enhancement. Something different from what Alex had encountered before. Like them, Elizabeth continued, the next generation of Chimera operators, immune to your little compounds, adapted to overcome any countermeasure you might have developed. Alex pushed Shaw behind a fallen section of concrete, her mind racing through options. Her usual tricks wouldn't work against these new operators. Elizabeth had clearly prepared for that. Time to show them something new. You know what your problem is, Elizabeth? Alex called out as she reached into her pack. You still think this is about enhancement, about making better soldiers. And what do you think it's about? Alex pulled out a small device, another product of her 3 years of research. It's about understanding that sometimes the best evolution isn't about getting stronger. She activated the device, and the tunnel's environment began to change. In ways that defied explanation, the air itself seemed to ripple, reality bending at the edges of perception. It's about learning to see things differently. The game was shifting again, and Alex Morgan was about to show Elizabeth that true evolution wasn't about strength or enhancement. It was about transcending the rules entirely. The tunnel's reality continued to warp as Alex's device took full effect. The new Chimera operators hesitated, their enhanced senses struggling to process what they were seeing. Space itself seemed to fold and twist, creating impossible angles and perspectives. What have you done? Elizabeth's voice held a note of genuine awe. This isn't just chemistry anymore. You wanted evolution? Alex moved like a ghost through the distorted space, her movements precise despite the warped reality. This is what real evolution looks like. Not just changing bodies, but changing how we perceive reality itself. She struck with lethal efficiency, taking down 3 operators before they could adjust to the altered environment. Their enhanced reflexes meant nothing when they couldn't trust what their senses were telling them. The Damascus files. Elizabeth realized, you found something in them, something about perception manipulation. I found a lot of things. Alex disabled 2 more operators, her attacks coming from seemingly impossible angles, including what you were really trying to achieve with Project Perseus. Shaw watched in amazement as Alex moved through the distorted space like she was dancing. How are you doing this? Practice, she replied, a grim smile on her face. Lots and lots of practice. The remaining operators tried to coordinate, to adapt to the strange environment, but Alex's device wasn't just affecting visual perception. It was changing how their brains processed all sensory input. Fascinating, isn't it? Elizabeth stepped through the breach personally, wearing some kind of advanced tactical suit. How the mind tries to make sense of the impossible. But you're not the only one who's learned new tricks. She pressed a button on her suit, and suddenly she could move through the distorted space as easily as Alex. The 2 women circled each other in the twisted reality, each reading the other's movements with deadly precision. The evolution protocol isn't just about enhancing bodies, Elizabeth said. It's about transcending the limits of human perception entirely, creating a new species that can perceive and manipulate reality itself. And who gets to decide who evolves? Alex's voice was cold. You, Chimera, playing God with the entire human race? Playing God? Elizabeth laughed. We're not playing anything. We're ensuring humanity's survival. The next step in evolution is coming, whether we guide it or not. I'm just making sure we control the outcome. They clashed in the warped space, their combat more like a dance than a fight. Each woman had evolved beyond normal human limitations, but in different ways. Elizabeth through technology and enhancement, Alex through understanding and adaptation. You still don't get it, Alex said as they exchanged blows. Evolution isn't about control, it's about change, adaptation, finding new ways to survive. And what's your way, Alex? Hiding in the shadows? Creating clever tricks and compounds? No. Alex smiled, and there was something dangerous in her expression. My way is this. She triggered a second device, and suddenly the distorted reality began to shift again. But this time, it wasn't just bending space, it was changing the fundamental rules of how Elizabeth's enhancements worked. What are you doing? Elizabeth stumbled, her suit system starting to malfunction. Showing you what real evolution looks like? Alex moved with perfect clarity through the chaos she'd created. It's not about getting stronger or faster or seeing new wavelengths of light. It's about understanding that reality itself is more flexible than we think. The tunnel's environment was now a symphony of impossible physics and twisted perception. Elizabeth's enhanced operators were completely incapacitated, their augmented senses overwhelmed by input they couldn't process. This is what I learned from Damascus, Alex said as she approached Elizabeth. Not how to enhance humans, but how to change the rules they operate under. And that's something you can't control, can't predict, can't enhance against. You'll doom us all, Elizabeth gasped, fighting to stay conscious in the reality-warping field. The evolution protocol, it's not just about enhancement, it's about survival. Something's coming, something we need to be ready for. Then we'll face it as humans, Alex replied, not as your engineered superspecies. She delivered a precise strike, and Elizabeth crumpled unconscious to the ground. The distortion field slowly faded, reality reasserting itself in the tunnel. Shaw approached cautiously, the case still secure on his wrist. Is it over? Alex looked at Elizabeth's unconscious form, then at the data and samples in the case. No, she said quietly. This was just the first round. Whatever's coming, whatever she was preparing for, this is just the beginning. She retrieved a small vial from Elizabeth's suit, the original compound from Damascus. The key to everything that was happening. So what now? Shaw asked. Alex pocketed the vial, her mind already racing ahead to what needed to be done. Now we prepare, because Elizabeth was right about one thing. Something is coming, and we need to be ready. She activated her comlink. Alice, contact. Maria, tell her to bring Samuel to the secondary location. It's time he knew the truth. And Elizabeth? Alex looked at her former mentor, seeing not an enemy, but a warning of what was to come. We'll need her too, because whatever's coming, we're going to need every advantage we can get. The tunnel fell silent except for the distant sounds of emergency vehicles above. The battle was over, but the war was just beginning. And this time, evolution itself was at stake. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.